This practical philosophy session is on the topic of emotions. In this discussion here, it's completely, pretty much unedited, and it's just a way for you, well, it's actually super edited, but it's just a way for you to kind of, if you're new, if you haven't been to too many, or if you haven't been to a single one of our meetups, you can kind of get a feel for, I guess, the vibe that we have when we discuss things with each other as we explore the topic. And then as well, we're in this because we love to just yap and explore different ideas, so that's exactly what we do, and it's pretty fun. So hope you enjoy it. Start of every meeting we do offer the guidelines, a little introduction about what practical philosophy is. We don't do this here because we're all kind of already friends, but I will include at the end of this video just a layout of our guidelines. So we're here today to talk about emotions and or emotional regulation. And so just the way that we generally do our practical philosophy club intros, what we usually do is have everyone kind of go around the room and introduce themselves, their name, and then initial thoughts on the topic, whether that's going to be, do you want to describe emotions, or why you think this will be an interesting discussion. We'll start with our boy, Mezzi, in the corner there.
Hi, my name is Mezier. Cool topic. I guess emotions are the means to an end, and reason is the end. I think sometimes people put that like kind of reverse that. People think that logic is kind of like how you get to the position, or reason is how you get to the position. I think if you look psychologically, reason is actually the thing that you put after, and then a lot of the times, like, the emotion is the framing in which you make a decision, and so it's the means. I think emotions are a lot more important than people give them credence. It's the underlying driver of a lot of the decisions that society makes and individuals make. And so I think it's really important to understand them and to factor them more importantly in kind of how we think about the world.
And my name is Paulina. Well, just in the name emotion, right? There's like already word motion, so it's something that's not staying in one place. It's constantly moving. So I think it's like similar to like it just can be described as energy, constantly moving. It's never static. So it's interesting, like in terms of regulating, how do we like direct that motion, in which direction? Would it be in a productive direction or like destructive, like towards ourselves? Can kind of, some emotion can harm our body, but then other emotion can like give us motivation to do certain actions as well. So yeah, I think it's very important. Like I think it's more of an important than developing, kind of relying on reason. I feel like the like regulating emotions and kind of listening to them is more important to me.
So my name is Patrick, and I also love the conversation of emotions. I believe if one person can have agency over their emotion or can know their emotion, I think that they will have full agency over their life. That's my belief, and I think it's extremely important to be able to accurately know your emotion, and then it's important to accurately be able to articulate what that emotion is, so therefore you can know that emotion on a deeper level. And I think that kind of touches on what Mezier was saying, is that the reason comes after you experience the emotion. So I think that we experience emotion first, and then it's up to us to attempt to sort out what that emotion is attempting to betray to us. And I think a lot of people get lost where they start misidentifying or not truly knowing what that emotion is trying to beacon to people. And so that's the journey I've been on anyway.
I'm Dahlia. My first thought when I think of emotions is I get curating your emotions, or observing them and being such an observer to the fact that they don't even like impact you anymore. But listening to you guys speak about the idea of emotions being first and then reason made me think about the way that it's kind of like a window to know about yourself. Then you have to be like, why did I feel this way? Why am I triggered in this way, I suppose? And I also thought a lot about repression. Like how when we don't face our emotions at all or ignore them, it becomes like this monster, this shadow that actually has more impact on our actions and how we respond.
And something you wanted to talk about in the jump off points was curating emotions.
Yeah. So a big thing right now for me is I try to control my vibe, I say, right? So what time I meditate, what kind of music I do and don't listen to. Like I mentioned, putting on Christmas music that is cheery as soon as I can. And then kind of being very into that curating vibe. But then sometimes when I'm meditating, I'm like, does this keep me further away from that concept of emptiness? You know, where I'm not just using like emotions as a high. Like I love the song, love this coffee, love whatever. But on the other hand, being so present to all of these things I enjoy doing curates an emotion that is like, I can make sure I have a good day every day, for the most part.
So you're more kind of like curating your environment, then
Mhm.
that kind of would have an effect on your emotions, right?
Definitely environment, but also sometimes actually like for instance nostalgia. Like putting on particular shows when you're eating just because you want to feel like a kid who came back from school again, you know? And those are emotions you felt before, but then you know you can get them going again. Or smells, certain smells that remind me of like childhood, like jasmine and whatever. So I don't know, that might even be just a missing of a particular time of innocence or whatever, and then looking for ways to remind yourself of the story of being that kid where life was simple.
Yeah, I guess connecting you to childhood, and I feel like childhood is where we kind of connect the joy. So it's kind of when we remind ourselves of like childhood memories, I feel like we experience more joy, like as an emotion. Like I would think myself.
Yeah, connects you to the play in life.
Yeah.
Jeff. And the reason, you guys are all aware of it, but you showed up late, but so the reason...
It's just different for
Just so you guys know. Is, last night we had a bit of an incident at my family dinner where my father yelled at his grandson for seemingly no reason, just had this like outburst of anger over pretty much a piece of bread. And then, due to this anger, and I guess like also due to pride, like he did kind of recognize that he made a mistake with it. So then he was like very nicely like getting other people bread. He's like, Collins, do you want bread for the ride home? You know? And he's like, yeah, sure. Like after a while, and he was like cleaning up the dishes and things like that. But he didn't actually say, he wasn't actually able to come along and say like, here's where I fucked up. And so I think like, is pride tied to emotion? And then it also makes me think about the idea of you want to manage your emotion, but you also need to use anger at certain points. And then, is emotion good? Is it bad? I think we need all of it, but I don't know.
I'd say we need agency over all of it as well, because I think that that's one of the unique things about humans is that we experience these emotions. We all seem to experience the same, like the situations might be different, which we experience them, but it's like it still remains the fact is that we experience these emotions. And then the question becomes, how do we deal with these emotions as they come?
Yeah, so as the story you were saying, I have experienced a lot of this as well, because I'm around a lot of men who've been taught to repress their emotions. But something I always think about in relation to there's some people who, when they feel something, feel the need to outwardly make the whole room that way, like stress, for instance, right? Or even anger or frustration. And they don't necessarily even know they're doing it, but it's like, it just happens. It's like if you're angry or sad, everybody feels it. And then there are others who very much kind of keep it to themselves, and it's locked away. And I've always defined that as having agency over your emotion, like the ability to not allow it to impact the room. But now I think more about like, is that true, or is it just kind of like drinking poison if you're never sharing?
Well, I think there have been studies done proving that emotions, especially negative emotions, are contagious. So if one person experiences negative emotion and you're around them, you're kind of gonna catch it as well and kind of feel it. right? So
That's
yeah,
great.
it is extra important to
Yeah.
be able to control your emotions
Well,
because you're affecting others around you.
But then, I guess that's number one. Mezzi and I did mushrooms in 2020 going into 2021 for New Year's. And one of the things that I recognized there, like beyond the anxiety that I had in myself, I could feel that there was now anxiety within society, you know? And I was like, just the air is more anxious now. And that was in the middle of the pandemic and things like that. And I guess the question is, do people, not sure who, but do they intentionally like poison the zeitgeist with certain emotions? Like say for example, like watching the news is designed to have this like shit emotion attached to it that then like spreads into the remainder of society.
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's about a bit of like the unconscious emotion, which just kind of comes up and takes over, and I think it's also resentment-fueled emotion, which we make a conscious effort to bring the energy down. Because when you brought up the one person being in a room to bring down the emotion, I'd even say that was me, and I could be the type of person who could walk into a room and bring the entire energy level down. And I could be doing it without the conscious thought, but there was part of me that was almost allowing my emotion to run wild. And I think it's because I didn't have a good relationship with that emotion. So when it came up, my conscious thought could not intervene with the unconscious feeling that was making itself manifest. And I had to go dive deep back into myself and my psyche to try to understand, why does this come up and how come it just takes control over my outward appearance? So
Well, it sounds like we need almost like exercise to develop a habit. When certain emotions coming up, you kind of have this better strengths, like cognitive conscious. It's like, okay, this is what's happening. I feel like at the early stages it's developing. So then kind of have certain like trick. It could be like just taking a few breaths down, or maybe like putting the music, like kind of curating a little bit your environment definitely to kind of, get control over his emotion. But it's like, it's only can happen if we can be aware of it, like early stages of it development kind of thing.
And
I feel like.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
It's like once the feeling comes up, it's knowing it. So I can feel it. Then it's being able to accurately identify where the source is coming from,
Yeah.
and then intervening and not allowing it to make itself manifest without any conscious interference.
Yeah, like in your example, maybe it was like, okay, I feel it, maybe I'm not gonna enter the room yet. I'm gonna go walk around a little bit and then come in, like kind of, but again, we need to like, kind of like, catch ourselves. Oh, this is what's happening.
So I don't think it's okay to allow your emotion to run wild. I think so that's what I kind of mean by saying like having agency over it. And I think that we can minimize the time it takes for us to acknowledge unconscious emotion running wild. So it can be, okay, 5 minutes before I can kind of calm down and realize I'm acting erratically. I think we can get that down to almost instantaneously, right? So that is to make the unconscious consciously known, right?
But then what would you do, say for example, other people would, like you're talking about with repressed emotions, like there's multiple people in cultures who are like, well, don't feel nothing ever. And so then they're like,
But that's not feeling nothing ever.
well, that's like kind of pushing it down. And
No,
like,
it's not. It's putting your conscious thought with the unconscious feeling. So it's being able to know why I'm feeling this way immediately, rather than just like sitting here for days on end feeling depressed or feeling anxious or feeling miserable. It's being able to properly know where this source of emotion is coming from. And I think that's what the capital W word is, or the capital L logos means. It's the conscious articulation of the unconscious.
So something I thought about when you were talking, actually, we have this idea that your emotions, at least in Abrahamic religion and Islam, that your emotions are not always under your control, whether it's the concept of the evil eye or the devil or whatever the case, right? And then as we were talking, I was thinking to myself, like, I've had moments where I'm observing my thoughts and I know I'm just grumpy because of other reasons, perhaps hormonal reasons as a woman in moments or whatever. And my brain will actively think about things that make me mad. They'll be like, oh my God, remember when your mom said that one thing? And then you go into the memory that you already got over for no reason. And it's like almost like my reasoning wants some kind of logical idea as to why I should be mad. And those moments I actually ask myself, I'm like, is this emotion even in my control? Is there a logical reason that makes sense that I can pinpoint it out, that's not like hormonal or like collective energy or collective unconscious energy, you know?
And it's energy, which means it propagates through a medium, but it also propagates like, it's like it moves through closed system and open system. So I kind of see like us as like containers, and like some people are like they're like this, where you know, if you pour a hot liquid into this, by the end of the day, it's still going to be hot. And these are the people who repress their emotions, right? It's that heat in there is unable to escape and like go into the environment, right? And so, you know, and some people are more like glass, where you pour a hot liquid in there, it just dissipates, or like metal, like very thin pieces of metal, it just dissipates instantly. So, like, if you put that same like metal in a microwave, an environment where the energy is increasing, right, where the emotions are increasing, and you put them in there for a long time, that energy will start to raise and raise and raise, and then when you take them out, right, it starts to dissipate into the environment, right? And so, like looking at it as energy kind of like makes it realize it's not personal, right? But it is personal. You can choose what environment to put yourself in, but like the energy flowing in and out, just like your thoughts are not necessarily personal to you. You're just in an environment where those, or you know, where those thoughts are more likely to occur, where that energy is more likely to enter your system.
Yeah, and I think this is what we're talking about in relation sometimes too, where therapy might not work for everybody, because sometimes it's like, if there isn't a clear reason and I'm looking for one as to why I'm feeling grumpy, is it good enough for my reasonable mind to just say, oh, I don't know where this bubbling of annoyance or anger came from, I'm just gonna kind of leave it to nature. Maybe somebody just literally walked by me in a bad mood, maybe it's anything, right? Maybe something I ate. And could that be enough for my rational mind?
Yeah, I think your rational mind's trying to do something very difficult, which is we're constantly like inundated with so much information that changes us in these like very particular ways, and your rational mind's trying to like find a needle in a haystack to change that variable, to change your environment in that very specific way, so that it can work in a homeostatic state, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe it might be this tuna or this thing that you ate that had like elevated caffeine, and so now your heart is pounding, and that has a physiological elevation of energy, and now you're looking for a reason, and then you catch this thought that goes into your mind, and then you think it's that reason, you know what I mean? And so it's trying to attach this physical reality to a reason, which is just like, what could it be, right? But it's infinite reason, right? And so your ability to reason is the ability to actually choose the right thing that attaches to the right emotion, but that's an infinite problem to like be good at. So there actually isn't no like absolute reason. It's just like you can get better and better at reason, right? But the energy underneath, like that thing, like it could be it literally could be anything, right? It could be like a moment you had as a kid, and now you have to go back and like recreate it in a certain way and like go in another direction and change that variable. But that's why I think reason's kind of.
Yeah, and I think even when I think like the conscious, like the unconscious, conscious, I feel like that's the struggle here, is I feel like to connect the unconscious to the conscious, to me, I associate the conscious with my reasonable mind, and this is where all of this, you know, and that's why I guess you have to touch collective consciousness, because it's not,
Just trying to fit in the slowly get the Carl Jung thing.
If I may go down that rabbit hole, Jeff,
Oh, you saw him, you're doing some...
Yeah, well, no, it's just like, there's a few couple Carl Jung quotes that fit accurately here, and one of them is, like, until you go through the inferno of your soul, like you will never like seek, or you'll never find like happiness or something along those lines. But it's something closer to this as well, if you guys don't mind me reading it. So people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. They'll practice Indian yoga and all its exercises, observe a strict regimen of diet, learn the literature of the whole world, all because they cannot get on with themselves and have not the slightest faith that anything useful could ever come out of their own souls. Is that relevant?
That's deep.
Is that relevant?
So I suppose the way I think it's relevant is because I think you touched on this, is we try to find, so whenever we start feeling a certain way for prolonged periods of time, so let's use like depression, I guess that's one example. And it's obviously not all, but like there's at least some who, instead of addressing the internal elements of their personality, they'll change their outside world, right? So they'll do anything absurd in the outside world in order to change the way that they experience their emotion. And I guess what Carl Jung is suggesting is that it's within you. It's within the construction of your personality, and I think that's why he uses the mandala to attempt to provide a visual representation of the psyche. And then, so then if we use that sort of frame, say, well, what do we do when there's a black hole or a corrupt root within our psyche? Then well, I guess the first question is, how does it get there? And the way I see it, it's when we experience some form of trauma within our life, that we experience this emotion that we can't properly identify, we can't properly know it, mainly because we're too young, right? Think of the articulative framework that we have when we're young, very limited, right?
Yeah.
Although pushing back a little bit, there's something I was thinking about yesterday, and it's not around emotions specifically, but money and the mindset around money. And I recognized actually, certain people have like, here's my goal, whatever it is, 5,000 a month or whatever. But then one of the things that I had to do was go and move with our friends Fergal and those guys, and just like, I was just around people who made money, and then that was the default in a way. Like I didn't really change any internal stuff, and then like by default I was able to like attract what I wanted. But a lot of it was just like being exposed to something different, I guess I would say. Like I was exposed now to something, I guess if you're like around negativity all the time, or you're around these things that would affect your emotions all the time, you have to like put yourself into a situation. And I was just thinking, like, damn, like I actually just got so lucky that I had like a group of like rich people to hang out with. And I was just thinking about it, but then it, like, that didn't necessarily change the internal machinations. But then like when I kind of came out, I recognized after a while that there's actually like some things that needed to be tweaked in there. So then I've now gone in and started like, okay, like let me break through this so I can kind of make money on my own. But I guess it is still like at this point now in my life, I'm at a point where like my world doesn't get much negativity, right? Like just by default, my default state is now like, not hating myself. But then it took a while to do that, and I got a lot of lucky breaks with it, but like a lot of it was actually just changing my external world first. Otherwise I wouldn't have seen the possibility. I don't know.
I actually think this relates to what you were just talking about, the idea of like if you want to feel a certain emotion, like bravery or whatever, how there's certain things. I feel like sometimes there's a frequency, like let's say poverty, the frequency, being rich is a frequency, being brave is a frequency. And then maybe you don't have it internally, but what you can do is see it in others, like catch the vibe and then mimic it as much as you can until you hit where you can't mimic it anymore. And then for someone who's like analytical, then say, why can't I generate this? What's that, the external?
Well, the mimicry, do you remember I shared about how technology kind of minimizes our opportunity to talk face to face, and our unique kind of human ability is to read mimicry of other people and then copy it. To kind of like, if you smile, I will be able to read, that's my human skill, and smile back. But when we communicate a lot through technology, we kind of like stop using these abilities that we have. So then as we're like connecting to the emotions, becoming hard. Because we're not exposed to other people and seeing them how they experience emotion. So like maybe like there's create more opportunities for repressed emotion. Because like we don't know how like if we feel certain, how do we behave?
Yeah, they have to. How are you feeling right now? Just stand there. I'll just text you how I feel.
Yeah. I'll send emoji. I feel like that emoji. Yeah.
But also like to kind of like maybe offer a counter. I've never seen as many people like outwardly expressing their emotion and just broadcasting it as I've seen today. Like if
Want
you
to just move that thing so
Yeah.
just in case?
Today,
Like,
here today, or like
just this
today's
time
world?
in history, yeah. Just if you go on TikTok, the amount of like young people who are just like, some people call it trauma dumping, and some people just call it like oversharing, but just like deep emotional moments of their life, just broadcasting it to people, and then having people like reply to those stories with their own videos. And I think a lot of our psychology is like very much attuned to, like you're saying, like understanding physical features on our faces, and kind of like those mirror neurons are designed to kind of understand and pick up and mirror in those ways. And I think we can't just like look at technology in this vacuum. We kind of have to see like what is the transition, what was the previous technology that this technology is supplanting, and it's books and letters, and so that's how we used to communicate across distances, was like this two-dimensional like written form, and now we have a three-dimensional as we perceive it, right, visual form of faces. And so it's like I think that's like the comparison. It's like letters to real-time FaceTime, right, versus like just this period in history where, because I think sometimes it's like this imaginary period of like pre-technology that we kind of like have, where it's like there was, before that everyone was in these communities and everyone like used to just hug and like look at each other, and I saw a picture from like the 50s where people are on a train and everyone's on it, like has a newspaper and is like looking down at the newspaper, right? And it was like, I was like, was there a period before any of this where people were like very communal and like very face to face? And you think about it, it's like even like in the 1920s there was like child labor laws, so people were like, you know, it's like you keep going back and it's like, where was this period of time where we had like this bond? But there is something to be said about the isolation, like the increase in isolation today.
Yeah.
So there is something real there where people are feeling like more separated.
Yeah, like I agree with it. I don't think it's like just technology. I think there's always different obstacles to prevent ourselves like to interact and like learn from each other.
Technology is just
but
probably
yeah.
the most common one
Yeah,
these
it's what's
days.
currently.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, it's like someone staring at the stars. It's like, oh, these stars. It's like, stop looking at the stars, man.
Yeah, look at me.
You talk face to face to me.
Yeah.
You always look up at the stars.
Yeah.
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 But no, I think that's a good point to bring up. I just think everything in moderation, right? I think once we rely on the cell phone communication strictly, I think that unfortunately has the potential to lead to communication breakdowns.
Yeah.
Doesn't always.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it does a lot of the time though.
Yeah.
So.
So this might be a little bit off topic, but I feel like people stopped paying as much attention to each other when their financial like survival started to be not tied to one
Yes.
another in that way, you know? So like there is something about that is different about like tribal life where our survival, our hunting or whatever depends on one another. But in terms of the oversharing of it, I think performing information is always the thing. I mean, sorry, emotions is always the thing, and it could be really fun, right? Like if you're a musical theater person, it could be very fun to perform emotions. But I feel like the way we do it now through technology is like, I want to be heard. I want my emotions to be collected in the way that like funerals are in my culture, for instance, where women come over crying even if they didn't even know who the person was, just because that's the emotion we're feeling today, you know, or weddings or whatever. And we still have the desire for that, which I feel like connects to the book Tribe. Like we still have the desire
I'm about to throw that in.
Yeah, okay.
Hit off everything from the bingo cards. Young, try.
Just in case, yeah. And I think now we're just doing it in that realm because we want acknowledgement, even if someone's just gonna like your comment about being sad or, you know, say whatever, like, or else it doesn't feel, it feels very lonely.
I think that's part of our the way that we like dissipate energy. Like in the framework of energy as motion, it's like if you're the only one feeling a thing, then there's a buildup of that within you as a conscious agent who is you just experiencing that. If there's 10 people, now it dissipates through the 10. I think that's why in those cultures you have people cry, right? To like have that like share that burden. And so like a scene comes to mind in Midsummer. Have you seen Midsummer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know the scene
Yeah,
I'm talking
no.
about?
I know the scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The scene is for you guys that haven't seen Midsummer. The scene is there's a scene where this lady's crying, right? And the group surrounds her and like hugs her, and they're mirroring her cry. So she's like, ah, and they're all like, ah.
Yeah.
It's a very, if you watch it, it's like a very weird feeling.
It's so weird. And then I was thinking about the other one because there's a scene where she's being intimate with the guy, and they're also collectively mimicking the orgasm.
It's
So emotions, do they need to be mirrored?
I think it's like energy. I think it's the same way if you had like a thing that had a buildup of energy and you brought other things that can also take that charge away, it would dissipate through the system, right? If you had something that's hot and then you brought a lot of things that are cold, the energy of heat would dissipate through that system, right?
Would they dissipate or actually like, you know, kind of sink into kind of resonance and it's actually be more powerful? You know how
Physically?
you know how soldiers not allowed to march on the bridge because right it would create this strong vibration and the bridge would fall. So like would it be a vibration if everyone like 100 people in the room feel the same vibration, it would be actually much more like powerful.
Elevated?
Yeah.
Like meetups or the fears that people have about like how genocide starts, right?
Right.
Or like panic, right? How panic just kind of like just explodes and
I think that's why they do it at maybe funerals, because there's this process that you can't get around, the grief process, right? But if you have people like you're saying, like these people who increase the amplitude of that process, I think the attempt is to like push a ton of energy through that process to speed it up. And so I noticed that like if you're the only one grieving somebody, I feel like it could take 20 years, right? If you have a ton of people who come for a funeral over a couple of like weeks and just feel the same thing you're feeling and elevate it to a level, you're pushing so much energy through, right? You can only experience your energy, but you're also feeling the energy of other people. So it's being processed at a higher bandwidth, right? Than it might have if you're just that singular.
But like, can it be spread out if you don't summon that emotion there? So for example, if say there's one person who is feeling the emotion of the passing, right? So then say 4 people come into a room, do I need to summon that hurt emotion in order for it to be distributed? Or can I safeguard it?
I think that goes to like what you were talking about. If you're safeguarding it, you're essentially becoming like a flask. Like you're keeping that energy within, and I think the energy just gets stored. And I think that's why sometimes it takes 20 years for that energy to, right? But if you just bring it into the room and the room isn't ready to resonate with you, that's like a person who is like an energy vampire who's just like putting energy that's not like there's like consensually participated with, right? I don't want to feel this feeling, but you're putting it into the room and I have to like now agree with you.
Okay, so that's what trauma dumping is.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what like sometimes.
Energy vampire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's why we have like one of the rules in our philosophy club is no trauma dumping. You know, and it's like pretty much that. It's like we're here to have this discussion, but if I'm talking about, you know, like
It's not consensual then.
Yeah.
It's like now you're just like putting
I think
it
it's
on.
overwhelmingly obvious when it's consensual. You know, people step in, they start to listen.
They're resonating.
Yeah.
Amplifiers.
So I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually just going to kind of jump off of that. I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita right now, and there's an interesting part where Arjuna, right at the beginning, he's like, "All right, Krishna, like I give you my whatever I need to do, like just take it like help me through this like process that we're going with, and Krishna's like the Hindu god. And I made a note of it that he was like, he said, now pretty much it was like a consent thing, where he's like, now that he has given me his consent to lead him, I will be a leader, which I think is something about like giving advice. It's like, don't give advice when it's not requested. Don't give, don't dump your emotions when it's not consensual. And this is something in Reiki healing as well. It's like, can I touch you? And this is like, an SJW type of thing as well. Like, can I touch you? I remember I saw this.
Sign the consent form, please.
I remember this one time, like the first time I saw it, I was working at like a more left-leaning establishment when this like first started. Like I thought it was a joke, but this person was like so excited and they wanted to hug this other person who did something good for their job, and then stop themselves and they're like, "Do I have permission to touch you?" And they're like, "Yes." And then they're like, "Oh, like good job," And I felt like gross. Actually, I felt disgusted by it. Because I thought it's like this weird thing where it's sort of stopping like a natural human emotion in order to get like a verbal, logical kind of consent, which we can see how that far that we can see where the problems are with that.
Yeah.
Like it's a natural,
exactly. Go the other
I'm
way.
naturally.
Yeah, you should be here.
I'm a guy, like
No,
or
but
whatever.
I've done that a lot to men who don't shake hands because they're very Muslim, and I'm a hugger. So I've actually been in a lot of situations where even like my brother's friends will come over, I'm like, "Hey, I've known them for a while." All of a sudden they get very religious and they're like, "I don't shake hands with women anymore," and I forget every single time. And then I tell him, I'm like, "What? Why don't they just like tell me, or they back away, or whatever?" You know what I mean?
Do you think these were ever issues that we had before we had language?
That's too much.
It would just strictly you would just. So I think that's a unique thing though.
Just solve all the problems with having sex.
Yeah. No, I know. Now, I think there's a fine line here, and I you know what I mean. And I think when we put too much reason between us and the unconscious emotion, maybe sometimes we can stray away. Rather than just having that perfect connection between emotion and experiencing. So I would call it flow state. Being right in the moment, right in the now. So say for example, Nezzy and I are playing hockey and he scores a goal and I just hug him. You know what I mean? It's like, so I don't know. I'm trying to navigate that realm of like when is it too weird and when is it.
I think it also comes down to charisma a lot of the time. Like if you're a weird dude and you're like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," and there's like this weird because it's like,
then you have to set the boundaries.
Then like, and that's
touch me.
I guess that's one of the weird things about society. It's like, okay, here's how normal humans work, and then we got so big pretty much after our tribal thing. Then it got to the point where, and kind of coming all the way back is in that tribe book, they say that like we are now in a time in history where we're surrounded by people that we don't know, and that's like. For most of our human history, even though like at this point it's been hundreds, thousands of years, that's still super weird, evolutionarily. And so I would say that's where the newspapers on the train, I'm not sure what it would look like in Rome, but like, my nephew, he kind of, if he sees like a little kid walking with their mom, he like runs up, what's going on? Like I'm starting to fish over here, doesn't care if the kid cares, it's like default state. I'm gonna go talk to this person because we're in like the same community kind of thing. And I would say that, like as we grew, that's sort of what changed that. And I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going.
I think when we're around people that we don't know, I feel like we create a guard. And that's what like more chances for repressed emotions, more scared to show your like authentic kind of expression emotions, kind of not being sure in what you're feeling. So I think it's, I don't know, but it sounds like it can cause.
I think sorry, can I just
yes,
because I was thinking about my dog, and I was thinking about the concept of like, the free language thing, right? The way that we are able to get so connected to a being that doesn't speak your language, and he's connected to me as well, and we're able to communicate. I know when you do something, I know what the difference is between when you do this move versus that move. And maybe we worked like that.
But there is communication. The eye, the look of like an eye, like the sound. There is still communication.
There's emotional communication.
Words only 30% of our
Yeah.
communication.
And the point is, like, that's communication across species. So
Mhm.
imagine, like, now, like, we've been around in this form, this brain, for 300,000 years at this point, this is what they're saying, right? And so this level of intellect, which is like on an emotional level within species, is almost like telepathic. The way that I think of it, I'm like if you had, like, to your point, to where you're bringing up, Pat, like, without language and just having that type of like communication with people who are in community with you, to me that's just like almost like a telepathic level of understanding where the individuated, like, perspectival consciousness is just less of a thing. Like, it's like my thoughts, my feelings, right? You kind of just intuitively understand it's like a shared collective thing. So you're almost like an ant colony. You know what I mean? And that's like, to me that sounds like, I can't even imagine a civilization that is like that. Just because I think language introduced this like filter. I always say this: we have like 2 eyes, 2 ears, right? 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, right? We perceive in this 3-dimensional, multi-perspectival, like unification of paradox way, right? Where it's like left and right meet at center, left and right meet at center, left and right meet at center. But then we communicate through one channel. It has to collapse into one signal. So you can only say half of the thing at one time, right? It just flattens everything, right? And so if you don't necessarily have to communicate through that filter, but you're just perceiving the collective in a similar way because your brain is configured very similarly, you're almost like it's a multi-processor that you're just deeper in this collective field that is just like a shared mind.
Think of
Right?
like
It's like an internet.
like a sporting event. You know,
Yeah,
when
exactly.
someone scores a goal and it's just
Together, yeah. And so it's like less of I and more of we. And I think sometimes we like look at like our past as like unsophisticated caveman, whatever. And I think a lot of the work that's being done now that I'm excited about is kind of like unearth, of just like turning that on its head. So how did these hunter-gatherers build this incredibly complex like temple in the middle of the jungle, and they're finding like LiDAR and seeing like how they lived. And this is all pre-literacy, right? This is all like if the mouth collapses it, like writing collapses it even more, right? You take one. This is where we get like left hand versus right hand path. Like a lot of what happens as like literature and word become like over the experience and like this holistic thing, like where the line and the square go over the circle and the wave, whole thing, is this need to like divide and like find the truth. Like, what is it, left or right? Is it this side of this? Is it up or down? Right? And I think in a time before language, in a time before this collapsing, it's probably more. I don't even know if we have the capacity at this point without substances to like conceive of what that type of civilization would look like.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any relation between unexpressed emotion and dreams?
Yes.
Like, I like where you're going with this. Yeah.
The answer is yes, but I know that when sometimes I have dreams, they can in fact like link the emotion that dream created can linger for several days for me.
From a dream?
Yeah, from the dream. I'm lucky that it hasn't happened in a while, but yeah, that I experienced and you just don't know. There's no reason to explain like it's not even just the real world; it's your dream world. So it's just the reason is useless in this case. So you feel like extra lost, like where it came from. So yeah.
I'll give you guys an example. I got into an argument with my brother at one point, and he used the term, he didn't even know what it meant. He didn't know what it meant then, which was gaslighting. And he's like, "You're gaslighting me." And the term to me had a lot of meaning. So I'm like, what? You don't even know what that means? I would never do that.
It's actually pronounced jaslighting.
Okay. The whole time. But anyways, I was super triggered because it like implies manipulation, all of these things. And then I let it go. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna go too deep into this and fight with him about it, fine. And I'm like, all right, fine, then I'm gaslighting. And then I had a dream that my cousin was in, and she was like, oh my God, how could you do this to me? And I was trying to express, like, what do you mean? I didn't do anything. But I had, you know, I don't know if you guys ever felt that feeling where you can't speak, where you're like between crying and anger so much and you feel it right here in your throat. And you're like, and it felt like I couldn't express it. And I completely related it, because I keep a dream journal, to that argument I had with my brother, because I chose to let it go and instead of like fully expressing, no, I would not do that. I need you to understand that I would not do that. Because in my mind, I'm like, no, you have to be like the kind of person that doesn't care about the image that others have over you. But it completely came into my dream as, no, you care.
But then what would the next step for you be from that point? Would it be to go and like, okay, I have to finish this conversation? Or say that you had this argument with someone that's like an unfinished type of thing? Like, how would you get closure? How would you like dissipate that emotion? Or what would you, I guess.
So I did go reopen the conversation. I was like, what you said then really actually triggered me, because I feel like it implies this and that, and he doesn't remember it. He's like, oh.
You know? Little do you know he's trying to gaslight you.
I know, just because. So in this particular scenario, it's easy because it's someone you love and you already talked to and whatever. I'm not sure what the scenario is, because sometimes closure is not always an option with someone, you know? So I don't know.
I was actually, I had similar situations that I went to a dance class, and the teacher was like the first time I experienced, and he said something that I wasn't like really agree, but it was my first class with him, so I was being quiet. I was disagreeing with him. So then I had dreams that a person that I kind of don't like was taking me in the car somewhere, a place that I didn't want to go. So, and then I was like very frustrated. So I was still like, in that moment, it's like, well, he's a teacher, I don't have to correct him, it's not my place. And kind of let it go, but it's actually what was bothering me, that he had the students, and in my view, he didn't say the right thing. So I didn't have closure, like, and then I went back. But I guess closure for me is that, like, I know for the next time, kind of a lesson learned. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think once you, like, if punishment is not reasonable or logical, as it will make this person better. If it's just like a public execution for the sake of like, we like watching people get punished. Although I understand that feeling, if people do like a terrible thing and you feel like, I need to see this person suffer. But then at that moment, it's kind of like that emotion or that frequency catching onto you as well, right? And making you.
And they'll justify it by saying, well, it's not about that, it's about showing an example. Yeah. But it is about that. It is about like the same way that individual might have taken it into their own hands to get like undeserved feeling of getting it off over their neighbor. Now they're trying to do the same thing in the sense of justice to like even the scales, but they just want to like take life or like do some cruel and unusual punishment. But they recognize sometimes, I think a lot of times people will recognize that is not a world that they want to live in. An eye for an eye is the whole world blind. So they'll switch the framing of it and say, well, no, what we're trying to do is set an example so that other people don't go down this path. Right. But then,
I guess on the other side though, you have like sort of the Genghis Khan Mongol Empire type of thing, where they had like, if you were found with an extra shoelace, you and your 9 other buddies who were in your unit would be put to death. And so then it's like, if you retreat and then your 9 other buddies do not, you're all put to death. And it's like this weird thing where having that, that very strict aspect, it did allow them the discipline to take over everything. Yeah. They beat everyone until there was one flaw in their system, which is a very side note, which is pretty much once the Great Khan dies, they pull back everyone and then they go to Mongolia and pick a new Khan, and then they send everyone out again, and then due to the alcoholism, some of them died prematurely, and so they'd send everyone out and then they'd all get like sucked back in. So pretty much that was the main flaw in the system, but it, like, I guess. And
the fact that they were trying to kill everyone and were evil. That was a pretty big flaw.
I didn't consider that.
But Rome did the same thing, but they lasted way longer. I think what you're bringing up there, though, is that
It's just the example of like sometimes there is this aspect of you need to actually dole out punishment in order to build discipline. And so like when we were talking about my nephew, you know, it's like we can say it was wrong for what I guess my father did where he yelled at him, but at the same time there is room for yelling, violence. There's like a time and a place for it where it needs to be, I guess, like, you know, it's like if there's no consequences to actions, then everything's permitted, right? So if you do just like, if you're raising your kid like, yeah, that's fine, like, yeah, that's fine, like, I don't want to punish them because I don't want to seem vindictive or whatever it is, and then the kid turns into an asshole, like, did you do that person a favor? And like spreading that out, like, as above, so below, if there's no consequences to actions in society, if someone can, like, say someone like gets drunk and like kills someone and then they just get set free because they say they're sorry, it's like, well, are we really setting good examples here?
Yeah, I think what Dahlia was talking, or I think what we're talking about is like the extent to which that occurs and the framing around it. So like in the Mongol example that you gave, like they're like the reason they fell is because you were describing they would like anytime somebody like the ruler died, they had to call everybody back to the center, right? And there's this level of like it's so extra, right? It's like so like the level of like extraness to and like in like rigid, like it's so rigid, so extra, so inflexible. That mirrors the fact that like if one person's found with one shoelace, they kill like 90. You know what I mean? It's like the same element is there, like spiritually, this like sense of like it has to be this way and to this extent of like reaching everybody. That same principle is what led to their fall. It might not like look that way on the surface, but that level of like we're gonna kill. If one person finds a shoelace, then 10 people and then their family has to die. Like it's like so much energy to hold the thing together, right? Whereas I think if it's something that's more, I don't know, like I don't know, like something that's just more carrot than stick, right? Then you have the dopamine, like the dopamine to want to do the thing rather than like the stick keeping you from doing the thing. Does that make any sense? Like I think they were more stick than carrot, right?
So I feel like that also relates to like the social parts of emotional regulation, because I think about religion again, but with rules, people get so emotionally tied to particular religious rules, so much so that they might even like become terrorists or whatever, and it's past the point where you're doing it for your best interest, and now to the point of actually we're all emotionally anxiously tied to these ideas, and who are we without these ideas? On the other hand, though, politically, you can do that with positive emotions as well. Like you were saying, I'm doing this for dopamine, like I'm volunteering for this political candidate because I believe in the future so much, or I believe in whatever so much. And it's still not necessarily coming from a place of, I reasonably think this makes sense or whatever, but now my identity is emotionally tied in a positive way to supporting this candidate, let's say.
I want to touch back on continue forward too. So I like what you're talking about, and I do agree that there are times that call for the emotion of anger to come forth, and there's times where repercussions need to be enforced in order to have a perfect balance of the just and the unjust, I suppose. I do believe that we have, I think I'm kind of repeating myself, but we have the capacity to control which way or how our emotion comes out. So for example, kids jumping on the table, and you know, we feel that immediate annoying angry emotions start to bubble up, right? It's like, you know, and it's okay, do we allow ourselves to let that emotion run free and whatever comes out at that time just comes out? Or is it, oh, I'm pissed off here and it's coming from that, I know that, so it's an immediate, yo, off the table. Like, you know, you so I find that we can harness that emotion and use it strategically. It's kind of like that saying, right? Like, become a monster, know the emotion, and learn to control it. you know,
But it only can happen if there's few times that you let them run, you kind of realize you made a mistake.
Agreed.
You fail
Yeah.
with your emotions, and only then, I don't know, you listen to podcasts, how to moderate what to do, read a book, right? So like, that's what I wanted to bring, that's kind of like a positive light on having bad emotion, like unconscious emotion. And that was, I think, Jung, but I forgot how the quote was put it, that it's like those unconscious emotions, like my favorite fate. And if we think about it, all those times that we kind of let emotion run free, those moments that experience in life kind of informed our future decision. So let's say you had that outburst of anger, you learned it, like you realized that's what happened, you read a book, you learn how to moderate, and then you shared with others, you kind of, it's like chain of events keep going, right? But it's all started because you let your unconscious emotions kind of run loose from the start.
but what happens when we don't ever address the unconscious emotion? Because there are times where it starts to run wild. And so, for example, you know, serial killers or those who go, you know, every time that they're out at a bar, they're getting into fights. You know, there's some certain people that's like every time they go out or they enter the world, their emotion just runs wild, and they never learn how to properly address it.
I think like the framing of like emotions as free or like controlled or good or bad are, I don't think that's necessarily the right framing from my perspective. I think it's more about appropriate versus inappropriate, right? As far as like, is anger appropriate in this moment or is it inappropriate? Is happiness or like deference appropriate in this moment or is it not appropriate? Emotions are just colors, right, that you paint each moment in, and you are always painting with them. That's how you kind of like interact with the world. So I think it's more about like, in this moment, as far as I can see and as far as I can understand in my past, is it appropriate to punish this person right now in order to live in a better future?
But where do you ask, is it appropriate or not?
Like in that moment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what's like what you rely on to inform?
So that's where the reason comes in, right? So a lot of time, like most of our emotions are unconscious. Like that's, you're a baby, you're essentially just like pressing buttons, spamming buttons, like everything is unconscious, right? And then as you reason, you're like, okay, when I send certain nerve signals, this happens, right? So you first reason over your body and see that there's a cause and effect with your body. Then as you get older, you reason with your emotions and you see there's a cause and effect with emotions. And that process is refined with your body and your emotions constantly. So it's when you have a thing that, like, let's say you stub your toe, you reason, you're like, okay, why did I stub my toe? It's because I walk in a way that like my pinky's out and it stubbed my toe. Okay, I'm going to change the way I walk to do that, to not do that. Same thing with your emotions. You had a fight with your grandkid and you're, you know, telling him he's a pussy or whatever, right? You go home and you think, you don't feel good in that moment. You feel this like sinking. That's probably what was going through your dad's mind at this moment. That's why he was like offering bread after.
Inshallah, bro.
But that's why he was offering bread, right? He's literally like processing it. He's like, this feels bad. I'm getting this feedback from the room where I'm, right? And so he's reasoning in that moment that emotion is connected to that outcome. And now he's actively changing it in the moment, right? Sure, you can have other people in there to help him reason through that better and see how this intent, like this emotion is related to that outcome, and so you can build a stronger connection. But to me, it's about he's trying to find appropriate ways to display anger, display deference in that moment.
But I would feel still kind of a little bit not confident to rely on reason. Like in my personal case, I feel like still reason can like up and go, like your judgment can be clouded, which so your reason I feel like can be clouded. So I feel like,
Of course.
like to me, it's still reason is not reliable method of like informing if it's how did you frame it? What? Appropriate and not appropriate.
Well, I guess in the Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, the first chapter is pretty much like, here's how you master your emotions, and I keep stumbling upon this thing like Augustus, the first Roman emperor, his Stoic advisor was like, before you make any decision out of anger, take a step back and recite the alphabet. Well, in this Robert Greene chapter, they talk about like, you should pretty much put as much time in between the inciting factor and your decision as you possibly can, because if your judgment is clouded, if your reason is clouded, if your emotions are high, then you're going to react in a way that's not ideal. Like those I sent Mezier this thing of like these race car I don't even know what it is. What are these guys called?
I forget what. It's like, those like derby, like not derby, it's like people who like soup up their cars and then they just drive around a big crowd and like do like donuts around the crowd. Have you ever seen? Anyway,
the one dude was doing these donuts and he hit like a pile of people and he ran over a bunch of them and then like killed one of them or something happened. And then like everyone just jumped on this guy's car, broke his window, and then like there's a video of him, he's like stumbling out of it and like he's just like kind of shocked and just like walking away. And then someone just like hits him, and then other people hit him, and then it's like a mob, and then they're stomping him, and they just like, instead of figuring out what happened, they just killed this guy too, And, like,
instead of pushing the car up to save the guy who just got run over.
They just killed.
Their emotions just right.
And I don't know why I brought that up.
So I want to say something in relation to the quote you mentioned and how I interpreted it as well, the Jung quote, that the issue sometimes is it appropriate or inappropriate? For me personally, is when you are like trying to analyze your own self internally as a book, everything seems appropriate. For instance, right? Because okay, I was triggered here. Why was I triggered? Because it's like a learning process. So even though I might feel anger in a moment where it doesn't make sense to be angry, or sad in a moment where it doesn't make sense to be sad, and I can logically be like, it's not appropriate to care that much, or to be this mad in this moment, or to be that attached. Later on, I'm like, I have to give myself grace about it, because I'm like, oh no, it's like your own, and it's like that's yourself.
Yeah.
Those are the things you're figuring out about yourself, where you're triggered, and every time I do, I have noticed if a situation reoccurs, there is less anger towards it, or there is whatever, because you understand more like why I can react more, more appropriately than I should in certain moments.
To me, that's reason. Reason is like connecting what you did to the outcome. Your level of like what the outcome is the level to which you're able to apply reason. Because if the outcome is like, well, I won the argument, I won, right? That's a very small outcome, and maybe you don't see like the effect that had on others. So it's a small, I felt anger and then I won the argument. That's reason too, right? The ability to kind of like go back in time and connect it, I would say that's logic, like building these chains of cause and effect all the way back to that inciting moment. But the reason is whatever you give the reason. It's like in the name. It's like, okay, I felt this emotion, something happened, right? How do those things connect? Well, whenever I feel angry, I do this and I act in this way, and that's why I want to. Okay, well, yeah, that's the reason, right? Reason doesn't mean it's right. I think that's one of the weird things that we have now. We think reason is like this beacon of like mental processing. No, reason is just the thing you slap at the end of an emotional occurrence that results in an outcome, and that's the label you give to that, like bundling.
That is a key area where you and I have a different understanding, because forgive me, I don't want to phrase it the way you understand it, but from how I see how you understand it, is like, it's like reason, it's absent morals. It's just what it is, right? So I guess that's where my mind goes, is that I think that there's reason that leads towards, I guess, a state of lack, we'll call it, lack of love, lack of light. It leads us down the path of the way that we don't want to go, the pathway to hell. And I'd say that there's certain reason that leads us up, and it aims us up, and it puts us on the path, and it allows us to, metaphorically speaking, walk with God, or be on the capital W way. And I think that's what the logos is. I think that the capital L logos.
That's logic.
But but it's not just logic. It's logic that leads you to the highest, right? It's logic that leads you out of the desert or out of the tyranny and into the promised land. And I think that not everyone has a relationship with the logos. I think that a lot of people resent the logos, or they resent going towards what's highest. And I think a lot of people actively, consciously, and unconsciously go towards the latter. Like, you know, and I think that's important when it comes to identifying emotion, because there's certain emotions that we can misnote, and I think that it can lead us to more suffering. Unnecessary suffering, that is.
I think we completely agree. I think the only part where we think we disagree a little bit is that logos is just about the right path. Because
it's the knowledge to on the right path.
But you remember in the Bible, in the Book of Eden, right? There's two trees, right, that are reserved for man not to eat, right? One of them is a tree of life, and the other is a tree of good.
The knowledge of good and evil.
Knowledge of good and
That's
evil.
that's the logos.
So it's not just the knowledge of good, right? There's a balance there. All morals are knowledge of good and evil. That's what the end of a book is. When you have a moral in a book, it's the knowledge of the path that was right and the path that was wrong.
Yes.
It's both, right?
Yes.
So that's where the distinction that I would clarify. It's
Okay.
not logos is not just the knowledge.
It's the knowledge of
It's the knowledge
okay.
of good and evil.
Okay, that's I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to not all emotions can be reasonable in language, though. I think it was Lacan, but the concept that if you feel an emotion that you don't have a word for, like something between like anxiety or anger, what do you do in processing it in reason? You have to, in your own language, this is why it's great to learn more than one language, I think. You have to like
Learn German.
learn all
Latin.
like art,
Yeah.
dance, all of these are languages too, but you have to look for ways to place that emotion somewhere so you can understand it. So you're gonna have to pick either, you know, I'm anxious or angry, when oftentimes it's probably something in the middle that language can't fully capture what our body's trying
We
to
can paint it
communicate.
into color, a form,
Mhm.
a
Yes.
line, right? That's why, like, you know, art therapy is so therapeutic, right? It's like
Exactly.
so many emotions, the majority of like emotions, we feel we can't name them,
Exactly.
or it's multiple
So
emotions.
the coolest thing I think about Nietzsche's book Good and Evil is I saw like a different way it was worded, and it's what's done out of love goes beyond good and evil. So like love goes beyond our articulative knowledge, or emotion. It goes beyond what we can actually verbally just articulate. Sometimes it has to be acted out. Let's ask this question. Do you think an actor can embody an emotion that he or she themselves have never encountered?
100%.
You
I
think
that's
so?
what we all do. I think we're all actors. We're pretending not to.
No, but like oftentimes in life, we will react to a situation, right? So no, I asked this because I just watched the Harry Potter films after finally reading the books, and I felt.
Really?
Nice.
Have you read them?
Yeah.
Oh, this is so great.
Oh, so you never watched them until you've
No,
finished
I
reading?
watched them, read them, watched them.
Oh,
That was my
okay.
order. So when I watched them, loved them, and when I read them, then I was like, whoa, this is really good. Then I watched them again, I was like, hands on the hips.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
So
good job.
No, it was hands on the hips for. I didn't think Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I didn't think Daniel Radcliffe was able to embody the actual anger that was represented in the books. So I guess that's why I asked.
Yeah.
He didn't get angry enough.
Yeah.
Did Harry get angry in the books?
He was
He
infuriated.
wasn't too mad. Like, he was mad at Dumbledore a couple
Oh,
times.
no.
He was mad at...
Did you read all of
Well, you read it recently.
Yeah, it's been a
Oh,
while.
dude,
that's
no,
true.
I thought he was infuriated.
But
Yeah,
here's
that's
it's interesting, right? We said that we can't put the words on emotion, but here you just read the words and you visualize, or like you imagine a stronger emotions than watching a movie, a picture.
It's your projection.
No, but then I didn't think that in the movies, his anger in the movies didn't properly, I guess, embody the actual anger that was written.
But it's often
That
in the
you-
books,
sorry.
like that when you read the books, like a story, you feel like then the movies, the visual picture didn't do the justice, and I feel like that's like you have like you experience strong emotion when reading. Is it-
He's a terrible
I-
actor.
I-
That's not
Okay,
gonna
okay.
It's your, because it's you, right? You, when you read it, it's being in, like, it's rearranging your world. It's a project, like, it's your personal movie, right? And then when you compare your personal movie to like a single, like whether that's a director or like set designer, this is a very specific, like how they see Harry Potter, right? I had the same thing with Dune, right? Like the movies, I was like, oh, this is okay, it's kind of good, and then like you love the movies, right?
What?
You hated the first movie, you like the second movie. But did you read the books like first?
After all of them,
So you read the books and then you watched the movie.
No, I watched the movies.
Mhm.
I watched the first movie, hated it.
Yes.
You sat me down for 3 1-hour
Yes.
to explain why the movie is actually good and it's a great series. I said I would read the first book.
Yeah.
And then the second movie came out. I watched that and I was like, that was actually a fucking banger.
Yes.
And then I read the first book, and then I quickly read the second and the third and the fourth book.
Yes.
And I'm
Is there only
really
20 of them?
Yeah.
Well, there's 6 that the dude did while he was alive, and then his son took over.
Yeah.
But so there's.
And again, even the
But-
fact that the son took over, he's drawing from the same universe, but it's a different
It's
perspective, right? So each instantiation is a different perspective, and when you read it, it's another perspective. So Frank Herbert or Tolkien or whatever author has their model of the world in themselves, and they put it into this book, and it's flattened again, but then you unpackage it and create your own world from it, right? And so everybody has their own version of the world, whereas a movie, you're kind of watching like the same version of the world, right? And so you can kind of like watch a movie and be like, oh, we kind of all watch that movie, but with a book, all of those scenes are happening. It's a
Personal
very,
process, yeah.
they're all personal.
That's one of the
right?
things that I notice when I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Every time I'm like, there's this completely unhighlighted section. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
genius. Like, why did I not highlight this before? And it's because
Is it all
I wasn't.
highlighted?
It's pretty much
Just
all
all
highlighted.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, it's because I was a different person reading that, right? So like before it was like discipline and Roman or like the Spartan way of life, you know, I like highlight that, like, yeah, fuck yeah, you know, but then after that, it like, you know, it talks about like how to find humility and this stuff, you know, as I'm going through further things in my life, it's like, well, okay, humility versus pride is a big one, so let me, like, as I read it, I'm like, oh, he talked about that there. So it's like a completely different book where it's like, oh, he knew certain things that I couldn't see back then because I hadn't made it there. In which case, I would say I agree with our boy Pat, who's saying, you know, you can't necessarily replicate an emotion if you've not felt it before, and that's where like a lot of actors do come in and they're like, you know, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was starting acting, he explains the process, and he was like, in his acting classes they wanted him to cry, so they're like, all right, like go back in and find like super sad parts of your life, right, so that you can mimic this emotion on screen. It may be you're imagining like your dog dying, but if it makes you cry, then like let it happen, you know, versus if you're like a child actor where, you know, like my niece, like all of her dreams right now are just about her brother Collins, you know, so then it's like, you know, they just like, she's like punching in her dreams and stuff, but it's like her whole life is this small little window, right? So if you're only 10 years old, you don't have a lot that you can kind of like check back on and like, okay, like this made me feel this way, because it's just like not enough data, pretty much.
I have a
You
lot
gotta
of
be a
actors.
mentat.
I have a lot of actor friends. They told me that that's the old way that they used to teach acting, the
Okay.
old method. That the new method is more like, from what I got from the description, it's more like hypnotism, or like when you're dreaming, or if you have like weird dreams, you're going through an experience that might not resemble anything in your waking life, but you're having an authentic experience of that thing in whatever context. I was in the Vietnam War. I had like you're essentially an actor, right? And if you have a dream where you're in the Vietnam War and like you had a wife back home, and like, you know, there's a purple dragon that the Viet Cong released, and like, you're feeling those emotions and reacting to that situation exactly as authentically as you would if you believed all those things. And so new acting is about like deep believability rather than pretending, right? What acting actually is the removal of the persona, that's the mask that you've stuck to your face and think is you, and realizing that you can actually inhibit whatever, you can take whatever mask you need to, because that's what you are. You're the mask putter oner, not the actual mask.
Then we start going along the Jim Carrey lines, right? And I find it unique.
No.
He's made the movie The Mask, and he also has the capacity to do that.
But I think
Did
the
you see
mask
the
is about
movie,
the fact that we are always wearing a mask. You think you're Patrick. You think everybody thinks they are who they are, but like when you go to sleep, that mask comes off, and you can just put, like, you actually actively have other masks to put on you, and you completely believe it. So what are you? Are you the mask, or are you the person who puts on the mask as you go from dream to dream?
I think they can be blended.
I feel like I'm wearing multiple masks all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, I feel like it's like.
So that's what an actor is. An actor is just somebody who does that consciously. That's why they have the two masks as the symbol of acting, the smiling mask and the frowning mask. It's like the ability to take the mask off and put him on is an actor. So can an actor act on an emotion? That's all they do. That's all we all do, right? We're actors on this stage where we're actively reacting authentically to emotions we've never felt before, right? And so an actor just does that consciously.
So the flip of that is I know people who are actors who have had a lot of emotional baggage from certain characters that they've played, right? Like because the character is very traumatic or very sad, and it takes them a while to actually disconnect and detach from that emotion that they had to embody. One that I've even said maybe this is not for you, and it made me think maybe you have to be a super detached, meditative person to actually be able to take on roles. I was just thinking about the Jim Carrey movie where he's talking about Jim and Andy, is it called?
Oh my! And then the making
Man on
of.
the Moon or whatever.
No, the one where he's talking about playing a character that impacted him. I forgot exactly.
That is it is Man on the Moon.
Oh,
Where he plays
okay.
Andy, but then there's a movie of him in the making of.
And that's Jim and Andy.
That's Jim and Andy.
Yeah, where it's a lot of it is the process exactly of what does it mean to connect with a character that closely and find commonalities with them and all of these different things. But in terms of we're always playing a role, we are, right? But at the same time as this avatar. So because there's a part of me not disconnected to this avatar, I can perform sadness in the way I've seen sadness be performed, or perform humility in the way that I've seen humility performed. But I'm still attached in this avatar to the performance.
I think that's bad acting. I think if you hold when you see an actor just be the same character but in a different movie.
Yeah.
I'm just watching this person be.
Will Smith.
That's just bad acting.
Yeah.
If I watch somebody just take Will Smith be the Fresh Prince, but now it's the Fresh Prince in the future, it's
Yeah.
that's
It's always
bad
him
acting.
as that
Yeah.
character. But then I guess if you're
Some-
charismatic enough, the
some
people
people like
want to
that,
see you.
yeah. So you're just typecast.
Yeah.
I think some people can be typecast where they're unable to remove the mask. It's but
Jason
people like it,
Statham.
right? It's okay, well, I kind of want this character in there. We actually don't want the variability, but actors pride themselves in the ability to take off the mask.
Well, some of them.
Some of them.
And
The actors who are I can take on a role and they become they method that's the actors who are impressing other actors. They're competing on that dimension, the ability to remove fully and just inhabit.
Yeah.
And that's
I think
their.
that guy in June also was a Little Woman. I forget his name, Timothy something. I think he's like that. I think he's a great actor, actually, because I've seen him play various, Willy Wonka, or a love interest in Little Women, or in June or whatever, and I can see all of these different characters actually fully.
Yeah.
He's wrapped up in him. Or was it called something about a boy that is more?
Is he in that?
Yeah, that's about it's about a gay couple essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boyhood is what I was thinking.
Oh no, yeah, I love Boyhood too.
So I guess so why do some people become so traumatized by parts they play? Because even Jim Carrey says the Grinch affected him in one way or another. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, I don't know what that movie.
Did you watch that movie?
I know, but
incredible.
He was
Grinch is
really
so
good.
good.
He was very Grinchy.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's one
word.
of my favorite movies that I'm gonna start watching soon.
Same.
Yeah, how did it affect him?
I will say though that we are running low on time. We're getting a little long in the tooth here.
Can I just
And
touch
so
on
we
one
should-
point?
yes.
Yes.
Is it with the Grinch?
No, about the body.
Okay.
So how
Remain.
body, not the point that I brought in the beginning,
Okay.
but I guess we have to be quicker. Kind of how through the body, through the use of the body, we can affect emotion. Like today we worked out, and I thought that will be kind of nervous talking on camera, but I'm so tired that I kind of just chilled and there's no nervousness. And just with working out and anger, right? It's a lot of people, maybe not for everyone, but just working out can minimize just angry outbursts, right? Do you guys
Sure.
agree?
Oh, yeah, that's
Well,
me.
this is something that I noticed. Me and my buddy Jake, we met. We were going to jiu-jitsu when we were in Mexico, and we got in a little argument, like a nice argument, but like we were like bickering back and forth, disagreeing about something. And then we went to one of these night classes of jiu-jitsu where it's like 8 rounds of just combat, and we came out of here like sweating, and then someone mentioned the thing again, and I was like, one of us was like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't care anymore either, you
Yeah.
know. And it's alright, like we'll just drop it. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this workout, is because I believe, you know, that we get, and one of the reasons I think the society is so polarized at the moment is because, you know, in America, 75% of people are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Those motherfuckers not working out. And I think generally speaking, people are unhealthy in their body. And then, but like as human beings, we have this excess energy, potentially emotion, that we need to kind of express. And if you're not exhausting yourself through exercise, if you're not getting that out somewhere, then you have like all this excess energy to just hate your neighbor, right?
Sure.
Or like hate the
Yeah.
current state of affairs or whatever
And
it
get
is.
yourself sick. Like, I feel like diabetes, so many diseases are about, like, because they say emotions, sorry, your body rules a lot of
Yeah.
emotions. And if it's not worked out, you end up actually making yourself physically sick, you know?
Yeah, I strongly believe in that. And I know that like in energy healing, right, they explain that emotions are in lymph nodes. So like just stretching and like all those like lymph nodes, massaging it and like even tapping, right, can really heal suppressed emotions, like traumatic experiences. Yeah.
I think it's a good place to conclude. Even though I felt that we have about 17 trapdoors that we could currently
I guess
navigate.
we also have the warning on the laptop there that it's on reserve power at this point. Camera's about to die. This one's still good. So we ran out of time, essentially. Thank you guys all for coming to our first recorded practical philosophy session. And that's pretty much essentially what it is. And we just yap, and we get off topic, and sometimes we get back on topic. Sometimes we don't, sometimes we conclude, sometimes we don't. And we're just here to have a conversation that is nice among friends. And now we each know each other a little bit better, ideally. And that's that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.